All right, are you ready?
Yeah,
We're ready.
We're ready. Jeff is ready. Let's do it. Okay. Thank you all for coming to Adult Bible School on a very rainy morning. It's good to have you with us. If you want to know who else is in the building, there's a funeral over there, or a kind of a private affair. So no one really knows that much about it in the congregation, but just that's what else is going on in the building. We have today Jeff Wild. All of you know Jeff, I think. I suspect he's been an active member of this congregation for quite a while. And Jeff and I go back a very long time. Yeah, you were in high school first.
I was in college.
Oh, you were in college.
Yeah, he was my first Greek teacher.
Yeah.
In Beaver Dam.
That's right. Yeah, it was a very long time ago. And
for you it was.
Yeah, our paths have crossed and intertwined all through the years.
Yes.
And both of us have been really engaged in ministry in southern Wisconsin for a very long time. And both of us, by different paths, have ended up at Midvale Lutheran in our retirement years.
All of them are doing.
Yeah, they take anybody around here.
There are times when both Jeff and I serve communion together here. We stand side by side, and we one of us gives the bread, one of us gives the wine, one of us stations. And believe it or not, that's one of the highlights of my personal life at this point in life.
You're not getting my Bud Light.
It's a personal privilege. And Jeff is a wonderful theologian. He's been involved in ecological and natural reflections and theology for many, many years. Major theme of his and his ministry at Advent. And without any more ado, I'll just give it over to Jeff.
Thank you. Yeah. It is a real pleasure and honor for me to present this morning, and part of that is due to the fact that this presentation has given me an opportunity to once again look through some of the work that I have done over the years and to bring that to this presentation. For me, it's been a meaningful engagement. So I appreciate the opportunity to share it with you today. I was unable to be here for Larry Fiddle's presentation last week because I had a Zoom meeting, of course, and Nan was here, and she was able to bring home the outline that Larry put together for you last week, which I really appreciated, although that kind of put pressure on me to provide you with an outline this week. But it was very helpful for me to see what Larry covered. Larry is a tremendous biblical scholar, and he really digs deep, and what he presented to you was excellent, and I appreciate that. The task given to me today was, well, I should say, Pastor Ken and I had coffee months ago when I first started thinking about this topic for adult summer Bible school, and talking about creation, and the theme that had emerged, I think, with the group that planned this series is right up here, dealing by and for nature. My immediate go-to in my mind was to think about nature unleashed and natural disasters and wanting to address that. But that really isn't what this is about. It's about the healing by and for nature. Besides that, the wonderful book I have on that Unleashing Creation, it's a short volume written by Old Testament professor Terence Fredheim. Um, and I could find it. I've been cutting down in my library from time to time for the past 10 years, and I gave it to someone. Most of my creation books went to Pastor Katie because that is something that has emerged in her ministry and journey through her faith life as well. Fortunately, I was able to retrieve one book from her that I could rely upon for this presentation. Um, but as I pondered today's presentation, some things emerged for me which really surprised me. Um, this word right here, nature, is not a word that is found in the Old Testament. Did you know that, Larry? Mm-hmm. Thank you. I did a search on it in my concordance, look at nature, and there's all kinds of references in the New Testament to nature, but more about a person's nature and the emergence of a new nature in Christ. But in my research yesterday, I did uncover a Hebrew reference. The Hebrew word for nature is tiva. Does that sound familiar? It's what's on our feet sometimes. Yeah, but as that, I don't know where that appears. It didn't say where that appears in the Old Testament, but it's not the English translation that I use, the NRSV, which I find very, very interesting. But so I am going to come back for that to that idea of nature healing, healing by and for nature, and share my own personal experience on that. But I also wanted to honor what this was publicized for today as the ongoing process of creation. Pastor Larry did mention Native American religion, spirituality last Sunday, Wednesday. And it brought to my mind this book of, I think I would call it poetry by Stephen Charleston. And this is what we learn about Stephen Charleston. Is a leading voice of justice for indigenous peoples, the environment, and spiritual renewal. A member of the Choctaw Nation, Charleston has appeared on ABC World News Tonight, BBC World News, and other outlets. The author of more than a dozen books on theology and spirituality, including Ladder to the Light, Charleston has served as the Episcopal Bishop of Alaska, President and Dean of the Episcopal Divinity School, and a professor of systematic theology at Luther Seminary. Have you ever heard of this guy? I have either. He has served as a theologian in residence at Berkeley Divinity School at Yale University. Charleston lives with his wife Susan in Oklahoma. He's Native American also. And this book was read by members of Madison Christian Community this past Lenten season, and used as their Lenten devotions. He talks about the tradition of the ancestors, kinship with creation, visions of the spirit, balance of life, the fifth direction. What's interesting, I found is there's no mention of Jesus, and which is interesting for people like myself and you. We're very Christocentric in our orientation, but a rich mind of creation and the spirit, which I really appreciate. You have to do some theological advanced thinking to say how each of these relates to a person of Christian faith, but I'm going to read that. There's a prayer, and this is called In the Midst of Creation's Wheel. It was not my hand that stretched the deep valleys of the earth, or shaped the jaded edges of the great mountain summit. I did not cast the embers of the star against the night sky, or pour the waters of the sea onto the dry land. There is a mind far greater than my own work, a will and a purpose exceeding what I could even dream. When life seems out of control, I go outside to remind myself of that fact. Right now, I'm thinking where Jesus tells the disciple, consider not the cares of the present moment, but consider the lilies of the field and the birds of the air. I stand in the midst of creation's wheel and watch and wonder the quiet majesty of its turning. We are in the care of a love without limit of definition, under the protection of a love that never looks away. God's revelation of love for us is in Christ, but we also see it in creation. This book kind of melts your heart and leads to a much deeper appreciation and affection for creation. So, those are my introductory remarks. I mentioned this is a 2-for-1 presentation because I am going to talk about the ongoing aspect of creation briefly, and then I'm going to get to my own stuff, if you don't mind. So what I did was I did ask Pastor Katie if she had that book on unleashing creation. Fortunately, she couldn't find it if she did have it, but she did find another book I had given over to her, which I valued very much. It's called God and World in the New Testament, A Relational Theology of Creation by Terence Fredheim. Terence Fredheim taught Old Testament at Luther Seminary for many years. He attended there as a student. He attended Luther College. He was my advisor senior year at seminary, and I have just deep and great admiration and appreciation for him. He died about 2 or 3 years ago, but I'm so glad I could return. Now, so you might be thinking I'm hearing one perspective of what Terence Fredheim has to say about this, but the thing about this volume, very long, is he is in dialogue with other Old Testament scholars for decades and how they are understanding these very perspectives. And as I read through the material I'm presenting to you, it would be great if someone just pulled out what Terry Fredheim has to say, rather than what Terry Fredheim says about Old Testament scholars and dialogue with him, to make that more accessible to us. But here's what the points making. What he says. Terence Fredheim speaks of creation as having 3 interrelated points of reference: the beginning and the end of the world, and the time in between, past, present, and future. Now, when I was thinking about that yesterday, or typing this out, the question came to my mind is how important it is to say the Apostles' Creed when we come together in worship, and how that threefold proclamation of our beliefs that's been given, passed on from generation to generation, what a great value that is. At the same time, I wonder if the first article, I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, might leave us with the impression of God creating only in the past, of thinking about that. And there, I'm thinking, gosh, maybe we should add on to that the creator and the sustainer comes to mind, but somehow giving a message that it wasn't one and done, but also ongoing. And I think so many people think about the material Larry presented last week, Genesis 1 and 2, the creation's accounts. The question was, then what? How is God involved with creation? So this is what Fred Heim describes it as originating creation. God is the ultimate source of creation. Most fundamentally, creation is an act of God whereby heaven and earth are originally brought into being, understood both in the terms of out of nothing and ordering. Now, that out of nothing, that's not explicitly stated in the creation accounts. In Genesis 1, it begins with, in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. I don't know if that means nothing. And I'm personally partial to the idea of ordering, that God ordered what was the formless void into the orders of creation. And not only creation itself, but the creation of the first humans, the human family, the ordering of society, and the ordering of cities. So my preference or leaning is to think about God's ordering in creation, which we see a consistent line through the book of Genesis going on. At the same time, I think, what's the difference? Whether we come down on leanings of the ordering or we want to argue that God had something to work with in the beginning. What's the difference? We agree on the fact that God created. So moving on to number 2, continuing creation. Creation is not simply past. It is not just associated with the beginning. God does not cease to be the creator when the work of Genesis 1 and 2 has been completed, nor is God thereafter reduced to the role of creative manager. God created a reliable and trustworthy world, and while God will be pervasively present, God lets the creation be what it is created to be, without micromanagement, tight control, or interference every time something goes wrong. Elements of unpredictability and open-endedness, what Ecclesiastes 9:11 calls, chances are an integral dimension of the ways things work in God's creation. God's continually creative work is both preserving. Now, my mind wants to jump in and say sustaining, but preserving and innovative. I like to be an innovator. It's a great gift. Now, you might wonder, what does Ecclesiastes 9:11 say? Do you remember? Just kidding. Again, I saw that under the sun and the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to the skillful, but time and chance happen to them all. Wow, think of that. It's so, my mind goes to natural disasters, and we can attribute a lot to natural disasters, to human sinfulness, and the disrespect toward creation, the land and the waters, and uh, people who say there's no global warming, or what do we have to call that now?
Climate change.
Sorry,
Climate change.
climate change. Yeah, uh, that is influenced by human activity. They're a minority now, and we know humanity has a great influence upon creation, and natural disasters are intensified because of global warming or because of the degradation of creation. But what we see here is God is not micromanaging, controlling every single thing that happens every day. Yet we want to say God is pervasively present. But God is also, because God is in relationship with creation, very much involved with what's going on with creation. And so what comes to mind is another wonderful theologian named Joseph Sittler, who wrote eloquently, talks about two kinds of grace. One is the grace that we have received through the death and resurrection of Jesus and being baptized into his death and resurrection, but the kind of grace that is a part of our daily life and the life of the world each day, that God is indeed working within that. One of the points that Fredheim makes is that that's referred to in Scripture in the Old Testament, especially in the book of Isaiah, as well as the book of Revelation. God is making all things new. And so there's newness that is coming out of creation every day, every minute. And creation itself is changing and adapting and evolving every day. And we get to witness that. So the third point is completing creation. Creating is also that divine eschatological action whereby God brings a new heaven and a new earth into being. Isaiah 65 and Revelation 21, which might very well be read at the funeral that's taking place this morning. That whole beautiful imagery of a new creation brought into being. The books of Genesis and Revelation provide a creational bracket for the Bible, and the texts in between are continuing witness to the purposive work of God toward a new creation. Now, Fredheim is an Old Testament scholar, and so this is eloquent, beautiful. I want to add, though, that Genesis and Revelation are connected by Christ. And so there's the fulfillment of the new, making all things new in creation, but also the complete establishment of God's reign of peace among humanity and with creation, and creation with God. We talk about the tree of life in the Old Testament and the tree with leaves of healing at the beginning of Revelation. What unites the tree at the beginning and the tree at the end is the tree on which Christ was crucified. And so there's a whole bringing together of salvation and creation through Christ's death on a cross. All right, I'm going to pause for a sip of coffee here before you get to part two. That was great. It's 25 minutes. So I could the rest of the time to share my own work. Any comments, questions? Wait, Thank you for using mics because, as Nan will tell you, I have great hearing loss.
I have a perspective on this that I only recently was exposed to that I would like to say. Yeah, I have
Start over.
Okay, I have a perspective on this, or have about this continuing creation. I watch courses on streaming from the great courses, and I recently, say about last winter, was watching one from about the creation of the universe. Okay, or Earth, all the way down, and the universe is continuously creating itself, or God is creating through the forces of the universe. And this, I always think about evolution when you bring it up about the evolution of life on Earth. But this individual that was making these presentations talked about the evolution of all matter and energy. And as I recall, he said, right at the time of the quote Big Bang, when God blew his however you want to understand that, there was nothing but hydrogen. That was it. And then as time passed, the whole set of elements that we observe are being created new over billions of years. Yeah. And that sort of correlates with what you're talking about. It's happening now all over the universe. There's powerful things going on that are creating new forms of matter as well as life.
Yeah.
So
wonderful insight. Thank you. And then there's the doctrine of, God continuing to be involved with that ongoing creation, that we affirm that, rather than, as Larry cautioned us last week, that God kind of wound up the clock and got things going here, and went over to another universe and wind up the clock and let it go. That's called deism.
Right.
It's not something we want to, I think, subscribe to. Yes, ma'am.
Well, just following on what Wayne was saying, I concur because I've been following that expansion of the universe. And I'm thinking, I'm not a thinker, in a big, broad philosophical way, but we need to be really concerned within that of all these space shuttles and satellites we are sending into outer space, and all of the detritus that is landing within the various levels of the atmosphere, because that has an impact and will have a further impact on this lonely little planet. So, it's really important, and I'm real glad you raised that, Wayne. To me, it's one of the really important things for us to be much more aware of. And that's just what I'm saying. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Somebody else.
All right. Well, let's move on to what I consider really fun stuff. I want to talk about the theme, healing by and for nature. And I never had thought of my journey as a person who works in landscape design or horticulture or a gardener as healing by nature and for nature, but the work I've done fits into that very well. One thought that came to my mind yesterday is from the words of praise that often were used in worship. back a few years. Created me a clean heart, O God, and renew a bright spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence, but restore to me the joy of your salvation. I want to think about the healing as bringing us joy, great joy, and how that has happened both in my life and how it might happen in all of our lives. So I'm going to read this excerpt, a couple excerpts that are from this little book, 40 Days with Jerry Apps by myself. And I think it's funny. I was noticing yesterday, I'm piling up my books. First, you got the big book, the Bible. And then I got Terry Fredman's book that goes about half the thickness of the Bible. Then you got this. But this is for people like all of us. And the first piece I'm reading, I titled Knowing, Knowing. And what I did in this 40 days with their apps, some people wonder, well, where did you spend 40 days with their apps? And there was a series of books that were published around the 80s about 40 days with Pepper Palmer, 40 days with Martin Luther. So that's where I picked up on that series. And what I did was I kind of flipped what preachers usually do. The preacher receives the lectionary for the Sunday, works with it, and proclaims a message for that. But what I did was, at that time, I read all of Jerry App's works, which took me a couple of years, and identified ones that I thought were especially meaningful, and I took them, and then I wrote a meditation on them. And so I kind of flipped the process. I was reading this and think I really appreciate Jerry House, and this is the way I still appreciate him. Pop wanted me to develop a love for nature that it was strong as his. He wanted me to learn the details of nature, but he also wanted me to know nature. Only years later did I begin to understand that there's a great difference between accumulating information about something, learning the facts, and knowing something. Knowing is deeper. It takes a person to the place where beliefs and values reside. It is the foundation for appreciation. Knowing leads us to action, to caring for those things we know deeply and working to preserve them for future generations. And this was my own meditation. The word know, like the word believe and love, has varying layers of meaning. Scripture testifies that God and human relationship is grounded in knowing. Psalm 139. O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. The Gospel of John uses the word know to describe the interaction between God, Jesus, and the humans more often than the Gospels combined. God was made known in Jesus, but the world did not know him. Jesus encouraged us to dwell in his word and promises that we will know the truth, and the truth will make us free. Knowing God, like knowing nature, goes much deeper than knowing facts. Grace is God's knowing all about us and loving us anyway. Knowing God grounds us in gratitude and a response similar to Isaiah's affirmation, "Here I am, Lord, send me." I read that. I haven't read this book for years, but I read it yesterday and thought, gosh, I really like that. And this is titled Restore. My love for nature is still at the heart of much of what I write. My feelings about the natural world run much deeper than merely appreciating its beauty. When I was recovering from polio and learning how to walk again, I often escaped to the woodlot behind our house. There, among the trees and emerging wildflowers, I felt accepted. It no longer mattered if I could walk or not. Nature offered me comfort and acceptance, a place to think or not think, a place to recuperate and become restored. So there we talk about nature restoring a young man, Jerry X, stricken with polio, and whose entire life was influenced by that suffering. He writes later that he couldn't participate in um, in sports like his classmates, and he became a writer of the school newspaper. He did somehow fool them, though, when he enlisted in the army, which I find interesting. But here it is, what I read. Restore to me the joy of my salvation, uphold me with a new spirit. Psalm 51. We sing this beautiful verse at the music in the liturgy because God's mercy and love is restorative. The sanctuary where we worship with others is a place where God's Spirit restores us through the means of grace. The gospel message and the sacraments of the Lord's Supper and baptism. In addition, we become aware of other places where we are restored by acceptance and comfort. These places are also sanctuaries where we can learn to let go of the pain that so often accompanies us through our lives. Nature can be wild. Nature can be healing. Nature can be a place to recuperate and become restored. You want me to read some more? No. Okay, so healing has to do with restoration, as you see then. But on my first sabbatical, I was a pastor 25 years before I received the sabbatical. I was in Janesville for 17 years, and there was a proposal about the year before we moved to Madison to make a possibility for pastors to take sabbaticals, a policy put in place. But to be honest, a lot of people really did get it and support it. And people spoke in opposition to it. And I felt we are accomplishing something by just getting the policy in place. And whether or not I benefited by it or not was not all that important. But after being in Madison 5 years, I learned what a wonderful gift a sabbatical is. And I decided to, I'm sorry, to my sabbatical at that year was to do a project that involved slow travel. And I put it together in this book I called Discovering a Place Again for the First Time. And during the sabbatical, I took the area that the Southwest Senate of Wisconsin, of the ELCA, the 12 counties, and I hiked the Glacial Drumlin Ice Age Trail. I canoed on the rivers in this area. I hiked, and then I did biking on the rails trails. And so I write about slow travel and how I would propose that is restorative for people. Slow travel also leads us to meaningful interaction with the environment. Our senses are heightened by slowness. You see roads. I'm sorry. this is the wrong page. Okay. If a scientific study were undertaken on the effects of slow travel upon our health, my hypothesis would be that slow travel leads to better physical, emotional, and mental health, deeper spiritual connections, and overall sense of well-being. Though we argue that travel at 55 miles an hour is both necessary and regretful, and slow travel is inconvenient and physically draining, the benefits slow travel has for one's overall health are numerous. Slowness allows us to linger in joy, delight, and awe, and wonder that leads us to praise and glorify God in a way that 55 miles per hour travel does not, right? I mean, we have road rage. It is the difference between savoring a delicious and nutritious meal, lovingly prepared by a friend or family member, and whipping through the drive-thru at the closest fast food restaurant. Slowness inspires us to love the Creator and creation with our hearts, minds, and souls. Slow travel leads us to meaningful interaction with God. The words of Psalm 46, "Be still and know that I am God," call us to sacred slowness. Sacred slowness moves us towards stillness before God. The move to inner stillness comes as our latest preoccupations are acknowledged and released to God, and follows after petitions for loved ones are lifted to God in intercessory prayer. Because we move slowly, we can carry a pocket Bible. I read a psalm on my daily hike, select a meaningful verse and repeat it until the verse is committed to memory, and the next day it's forgotten. Then I allow the verse to have its way by leading to deeper contemplation and prayer. Slowness leads to stillness and openness to God's Spirit. So that was one of the reflections I read. So slowness is important, I think, for the human body and for nature. Okay, so my theme moves on in that we are restored, and I think that's what Pastor Katie will cover a lot. And her sections on forest bathing, faith, and healing power of creation. I keep wondering when I hear that forest bathing, can we keep our clothes on?
Yeah.
But I'm sure we can. But I want to provide examples of restored people, restored creation or nature, and how that is also a source of joy and, for us. And so, remember about, I don't know, 6-8 weeks ago, there was this famous landscape architect that spoke in here to a full room and showed us slides of his work as a landscape architect that were just breathtaking. You won't be seeing that. You're going to see some messy stuff, which I think creation can be or is. And so I'm going to show you, this is kind of my own personal journey of restoring creation in my own place. Thank you to Emily for setting this up with me. This is the first time I've given a presentation using this. Okay, so we're looking at, this was taken from our deck in our home in the backyard. And what I took this for a couple reasons. Our backyard is sloped downward, and I'll say more about this in a minute. It's kind of a city-owned property where runoff can go and goes down to a pond, stripper pond, down the street from us. But you go down our sloped hill, and it goes up. it's rather steep in places. I wear football shoes that I picked up on the University of Wisconsin Swap Shop website. And sometimes I will use a rope that our son, who is a climber, retired and gave to me. And I tie myself in because it's easier to work that way. But it gets real steep. And I've been working on restoring this hill ever since we moved in. And I'm probably on my third attempt. First, we stripped it of all the invasives that was just overrun with invasives and tried to put in some pretty plants. But the challenge is this is a big piece. It's um, a big landscape to work on. And that didn't work so well. I took a course in permaculture design and thought, systematically about what might go into the hillside down. And I had raspberry plants and things like that. That didn't go very well either. So what I've been doing is filling in with things that will grow and spread, and I'll be saying more about that in a minute. Huh. My push.
There.
There we go. Okay. So I don't know, was it 10 years ago now when we had that flood?
No, 2018.
2018. Okay. You remember the date. Good for you.
Oh yeah, we talk about it a lot.
We our backyard was a river in the torrential downpour of 2018. And what happened is the water from Gam Road flooded over the curb and all came down toward our house. And then all the water on Long Meadow Road where we live also went over the curb and came toward our place. And because the drainage system was not such that it could handle it. And no kidding, we had right here a ditch 10 feet deep that was caused by the flooding. And it really became kind of a tourist area for a time. And when the city did a report, it put together a slideshow of where places were really impacted by the flooding. This spot was number one in the slideshow. I was very proud of that. That's our yard. So what's happened there is it was restored. It wiped out everything, all the work. I had a two-tiered garden beds. And are you familiar with this?
So that rainfall, just so you know, speaking about chance, was a 1,000-year event. You know how you talk about the 100-year flood? When Herb Garden, who's a hydrologist, did the analysis, you extrapolate back, it was a 1,000-year event. So very dramatic.
Thank you. Okay, so the city had to repair, and they put in, the drain, and only until a few weeks ago they replaced the big culvert on Long Meadow Road to handle more drainage. And but what you see here is all work I did, and it's raised up, and but the way I got the little swale there was to take trees that had fallen down and laid them down and covered them with soil. It's called hugelkultur. It's practiced in Germany. And as that decomposes under there, it's very nutritious for the plants. These are native plants that I purchased through Agricole, and they provide nice screening. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. That it wouldn't be attractive at all. So, yeah, okay. That's a picture, the back of our house, where I took some of these pictures from. Whoops. Okay, here I'm looking up at the hill, and what I've done is I put in sedges right here, just phalanx sedges that were given to me by a fellow friend of mine who lives out on the lake, Lake Mendota. And those have filled in very nicely. And I'm going to be dividing them and putting in other places. But I also have a little story about what is starting to emerge are lilies. And these came from a friend that I was a classmate in our master gardening class, and I've done some work for him. I had my own little yard business for about 5 years after I retired, called it Yard Reformations, is my brother. I did a lot of work for him. And he's president of the Daylily Association. He also volunteers in our garden here, and we've become friends. But he wants to make his backyard sort of a tourist or a designated daylily place that you can walk through. And but in order to do that, he has to label everything, name every kind of daylily. And he did have names on the daylilies before he decided to do this. So I went over and helped them out by taking about, 100 daylilies out there and planted them on the hillside, and they're taking off. So this is not native, it's called filler. I just want to fill in the hillside to reduce invasive species. Okay, there's another picture of the sedges. Do you know what these are referred to? Ditch lilies. You see them in the country all the time. I love them. So what I threw this in because you see a little a shrub here that were given to me by John Warnock. He wanted to get some things out of his yard, so I came over, we dug them out and planted them there, and they're actually growing. So I got to say, when I look out at the hillside now, the day it gives me a great joy to see the daylilies flourishing and blossoming, and how things have grown. Okay, this is an area. This did exist for many years after we moved in, and it was just grass all the way over to the sidewalk that goes to a park behind our house. So what we have here are all native plants, and we started them we purchased them as seedlings, and over the last 5 years they've really filled in to the point where I probably need to widen this and transplant and make it bigger. I get a reaction to that. Okay.
What is some of that lawn? Go for it.
Yes. Okay, so this is going up that trail you just saw, and unlike the landscape design guy, it's pretty messy. But when I did landscape work for people, they wanted hostas thinned out or taken out, and so I bring them home and stick them along this trail here, and the same goes for the ferns. There's 3 different parties that said, "Hey, you want some ferns?" And they said, "Yeah." And that area was also overgrown with invasives. You couldn't see really down the hill or through that area beforehand. And I'm at the point now where I need to be thinning that, and I will continue to expand that area. This is looking behind that wooded area. You can see the hostas are great fillers for sure. This is an area behind that wooded area I just showed you, that was disrupted by in another storm about 2 years ago, where a huge tree fell, and that's when we learned that. Oh yeah, that's your property. People will say, we really don't know what's ours and what belongs to the city and what belongs to the neighborhood association. But I'm working at doing restoration work in this area now, and it's going to take some years. All these red, yellow flags were planted by a middle school student who was somewhere and came home with seedlings. The only problem is the rabbits are just terrible this year. They have nipped off the tops of all those seedlings, so I don't have great hope for those. Okay, another picture of that area. Last fall, I actually planted 1,000 bulbs in there, and of a variety of plants. Tulips and daffodils and small plants, and it did okay, but I realized they don't all come at the same time. I expected this beautiful, colorful panorama view, and it didn't quite work to that. So Plan B is going to be coming up soon for me. This area here goes all the way down to prairie area that I tried to restore by tilling it up, cleaning it up. I covered it with black plastic for a year to kill the weeds, and planted native seeds for in there, and I haven't had much success. So the neighborhood groundskeeper, he likes grass. And I finally realized I bit off more than I could chew here or want to take care of it anymore. So this is being turned into a grassland area. But this goes down to a prairie that was started by this man, Ken and his wife Jean Nordland, over 30 years ago. Ken was in Vietnam during service for a year, and he was an assistant to a veterinarian taking care of the guard dogs. One day, the veterinarian took him aside and said, "You should go into veterinary medicine." And that actually was the beginning of Ken's journey that led him to teach at the School of Veterinary Science and Maths, and did great work in caring for cows. And but he really oversaw the prairie, probably did 90% of the work. And because he was in Vietnam, he was also exposed to Agent Orange because it was applied all around the facility where he worked, and he died of cancer a year ago. And I miss him a lot, but some neighbors contributed to this little monument with gratitude, and Ken and Jean Norton, stewards of the prairie. And it gives me a great pleasure to know how much that phrase, stewards of the prairie, meant to them. This is the prairie. Now, with Ken's death, he would spend 10 hours a week working the prairie. I get a kick out of people who think you could establish prairie and walk away from it and just enjoy it. Whew, it's work. And after Ken's death, it's, oh no, what do we do now? Who's going to mow the trails through here? Who's going to take care of things? Well, there's a group of about half a dozen people now in the neighborhood who have come together to work on the prairie. And I've been going through the prairie twice a week, on Wednesdays generally, and Sunday mornings before we come to worship, and spraying invasives, especially leafy spurge, which is pretty yellow flowered, but also quite invasive, to try to get this prairie up to snuff. Because for the last couple of years, time? Okay. I'm almost done, actually. Okay, so here we see some things coming in, the prairie. Now this is in a park behind our house, so okay.
Sandbox.
I think that's it. And so, I show these mainly to emphasize restore people, restore nature, and work to do that. And will say that it is a joy for me to do that, uh, and a great pleasure to hear from other people that they appreciate it as well. So, yeah, bringing nature home. Um, is a book I was given some years ago. I still haven't read the whole thing, but the author of this book says because of um, things like the prairies have been largely eliminated in our country, we've also lost great diversity in in animal life. There's a woman over at Mass Christian Community now who is a photographer, and she's photographed insects on the prairie. And one of them was in the New York Times a while back. And beautiful photography work of all the different insects. She's finding insects that people were aware that were even in this neck of the woods. And I don't know how many dozens of different insects she's photographed in the plants on the prairie. So what the author of this book proposes is we need to bring nature home. That even if it's a small piece of real estate or a public land, there are places we can work to restore to nature, to restore the diversity that brings in bird life and other kinds of animal life to the area. Okay, I've been over, but I'm really proud of myself. Usually I have so much more that I never get through. But that completes my presentation. I'll just ask if any of you have any questions or comments.
Jeff, thank you. Oh, well, I don't know. Are there questions? I didn't mean to. Thought we paused. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You can go home now.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Tommy is a really good author.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff, very much.
Thank you.
I just when we were talking about order, God creating the order, I was just thinking about how everything is arranged and arrangement and how it continues to be rearranged, all of life. So thank you.
For chance.
With room for chance. Ecclesiastes. We take a break now for a couple of weeks, but Wednesday after the 4th of July, we continue, 10 a.m. Meg and Glenn Nielsen will be with us. They have been working in sustainable agriculture on a family farm they've been trying to preserve in Minnesota. They live in Madison here. They are members of St. Stephen's Lutheran Church. They have a wonderful story about the joys and struggles of trying to do sustainable agriculture in the upper Midwest. And it's just many of the things you talked about at the end of your story are just part of their struggle on the agricultural side. And it's just a really interesting story. And I hope you can come back and see us for Healing in Nature in a couple weeks. Enjoy the 4th of July and see you after.
Everyone's name. Good to see you. I didn't know.
It's quite steep.